Welcome to this special segment of Turning Hard Times into Good Times. I'm really happy to have with me once again William Engdahl. We miss William for our regular show, so we're doing this special one because he has so many, I think, very important insights into Donald Trump and what might be in store for us. And it's, well, I must say with some consternation, not something that I'm necessarily looking forward to. It is with great pleasure I welcome you again, William. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Jay.
I should mention to our listeners it's williamengdahl.com, williamengdahl.com. That's the place I go to catch up with William's frequent missives. And, of course, he is a prolific author, historian, written many good books, some of them that I know I've read that I have on my bookshelf, The Gods of Money, which is a must-read, I think, for anybody who cares at all to understand what really has happened in American history and how we've affected the lives of millions of people around the world, and in most instances, I dare say, not in a positive way. The Century of War, I think, that was your first book, I believe, wasn't it, William, or one of your first books? And that really sort of ties in the importance of oil in geopolitics. And then one of the more recent ones, The Lost Hegemon, I think really brings us up to date now with where things are in the global scene geopolitically. Very important work. But I want to talk to William today about Donald Trump and what that might mean for us going forward. So, William, I had been hopeful. I must say that I had been hopeful that in listening to some of the rhetoric from Donald Trump that maybe something good could come of it, that maybe we could have a more, let's say, a multipolar world instead of a strong hegemon, a U.S. Government or a NATO U.S. government that seems to be hell-bent on running the world. But according to an article that you just posted, it doesn't seem as though you feel that way. I would like to just quote a couple of lines from your article that you wrote yesterday. You said, and I quote, "The project called the Trump presidency is just 2 months before its formal beginning. Yet already the hopes and fantasies of much of the world are making him into something and someone Donald Trump most definitely is not. Donald Trump is yet another project of the same boring old patriarchs who try again and again to create a one-world order that they control absolutely, a new world order that one close Trump backer once referred to as universal fascism. Ignore the sometimes fine rhetoric in some of his speeches. Talk is cheap. If we consider rather the agenda that's taking form, even in these very early days of cabinet naming, we can see that Donald Trump is the same agenda of war and global empire as Obama and Bush before him, as Bill Clinton and Clinton's tutor, George H.W. Bush, before him. There is no good side to what the world is about to experience with President Trump." And then you went on to say, don't be fooled. The patriarchs are not surprised. You said, we further should not imagine for 1 second that the patriarchy, those loveless old men like David Rockefeller and George Herbert Walker Bush, or unnamed others, were so overwhelmed by the political genius of candidate Trump emerging from every scandal more powerful than before, that they were surprised, outfoxed, and just groaned and let it happen. End of quote. Well, William, I have to ask you, I remember seeing one of the presidential debates, George Herbert Walker Bush sitting up there in the grandstands, and when Trump was announced, he took his hand as if to slice the head off. I don't know if you saw that gesture or not, but he sat up there and he said, when Trump and people were booing and George Herbert Walker, the cameras panned in on him, and he took his finger and did a guillotine across the neck, like, we got to get rid of Trump. Now that might have just been show. But are you suggesting basically that Americans, people like me who voted for Trump, that we were duped into believing that he was serious about the stuff he said? There's just populist rhetoric to get him elected, and then he's going to turn on all of us?
If you look with a clear heart and a clear eye at Donald Trump when he makes speeches or makes comments and so forth, you can feel that he doesn't have an honest bone in his body. He's a complete fake. He's an actor. In my article, I use the word sociopath, which I define, or the Psychological Handbook defines, as antisocial personality disorder characterized by a lack of regard for the moral or legal standards in the culture. And he said also narcissism would be another apt term. Extreme selfishness with a grandiose view of one's own talents and a craving for admiration. Now, I have followed Donald Trump for about 25 years on and off, and the man is not clean. He's one of the dirtiest businessmen in New York. He ran gambling casinos with the mob, with the CIA, Resorts International, Atlantic City, and so forth. You don't do that if you're a man of the Lord and honest and so forth. He talks about his career as a mentor of Roy Cohn. Now, Roy Cohn was one of the attorneys during the Joe McCarthy trials in the 1950s. Roy Cohn was the attorney for the mob, for the organized crime in New York. And he went with, Trump even writes about this in his autobiography back then. I have it in my library. I reread it when he became a serious contender. He talks about sitting there in Studio 54, which in the 60s in early 70s was a notorious cocaine, chicaria in place in Manhattan. And he describes sitting there with Roy Cohn, he says, watching while 8 breathtakingly beautiful models were fornicating on tables in the middle of Studio 54. And he says it was just locker room talk, what he said 11 years ago with Billy Bush. This is the moral character of this man named Donald Trump. He's definitely, as I said, no JFK, no Charles de Gaulle, not even close. But the point is not Donald Trump. He's a null. He's a zero. He's nothing. He is just an actor that the patriarchy, the oligarchy, put in there to create a certain feeling state in the population. Number one, okay, you're angry, you're out of a job, the country is going to hell in a handbarrel. Obama doesn't seem to care, he doesn't have a clue, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, this guy is going to make it right. He's going to go against all the multinational corporations and so forth and break these trade agreements, and suddenly, everything is going to be cool and good and so forth. And, he would have a bullet in his head if David Rockefeller found him to be a threat in any way, shape, or form. The same way JFK had a bullet in his head. Don't be naive about what these oligarchs mean with American presidents. Think about Obama, the president of change. What did he do? He made more wars than even George W. Bush, the Nobel Peace Prize president. So, let's be serious. But the other thing is, Jay, if you look at who, let's not just take that on an abstract level. Let's go into the clues that we have so far about the people that are going to be running the Trump presidency, because, Ronald Reagan didn't run the Reagan presidency. George Bush Sr., his vice president, ran everything on foreign policy and intelligence. Reagan signed off a secret agreement to that effect. So it's now known. But so let's look at who is going to be running the show. Well, we have a 3-star general named Mike Flynn to be the president's national security advisor. Well, analysts who ought to know better say this is brilliant, this is beautiful news, joy, da 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 da. Because they quote a quote from Mike Flynn saying the Iraq war was a mistake, that the U.S. should not have sponsored ISIS, various things like that. So this is a good guy. This is a general who's for peace and love and all this stuff. But look more closely at Michael Flynn. He was fired. Oh, then the other thing is he was fired by the Obama administration because he objected to the Obama Victoria Nuland tilt against Russia in Ukraine and the demonization of Russia and the support of the Muslim Brotherhood, and said we should be focusing on getting rid of al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, ISIS, and so forth, and not Russia. Well, that doesn't mean he thinks Russia is good and ought to be doing what it's doing. It's a military general with a strategic calculation.
Yeah.
This is a wrong tactic. If we want a global one world empire, this is a wrong tactic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's basically the point. Everywhere you look in the world, the patriarchy of the United States was losing because of the policies of George W. Bush and then Obama. They were losing Russia, the insane coup d'etat in Ukraine, Victoria Nuland and Joe Biden engineered basically for Obama. It blew up in their face because what happened? Russia turned to the east. They turned to China in the crisis and became closer than ever in their mutual history. They made economic deals, oil and gas pipeline deals. Not only that, they joined the China One Belt, One Road, high-speed rail and port infrastructure project to link with the rail links to China and also to Iran, and bring all of Eurasia into one economic space. Well, that is the nightmare of Zbigniew Brzezinski. So even Brzezinski last summer in his website issued a statement saying, if we continue in this way, this will bring China and Russia into a strategic alliance, and that's not good for us. So this is what the Trump project, don't focus on the man. The man is a null, he's a cipher. He's a showtime, but he's just there to produce rage and direct it in a certain direction. Mm-hmm. But the Trump project is aimed at a deception, and the deception is, okay, let's pretend America is going to make up and be lovey-dovey with Vladimir Putin and Russia and try to split Russia and China, while we escalate the pressure on China and we escalate the pressure on Iran. And that's basically the geopolitical purpose of what's called the Trump presidency. Oh. Now,
So it's sort of a divide and conquer approach
very
then.
Much so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very much so. And here are some concretes to that. Trump's Middle East terrorist advisor is a man named Walid Phares. Walid Phares gave an interview in the Egyptian press saying that Donald Trump is going to support a bill in the Congress to ban the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. Whoopee! I wrote a book called The Lost Hegemon. Most of it is about the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization supported by the CIA since the 1950s. So I have nothing against that. Hillary Clinton's closest advisor was a Muslim Brotherhood sister, Huma Abedin. I wrote about this extensively. And Huma Abedin's mother, her father, her whole family, her brother are Muslim Brotherhood. They're terrorists. So, this, I have no objection to calling them what they are. They're a death cult. But that's not what's going on here. The Walid Phares is a senior fellow in a think tank in Washington called the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Huh. Now, every time you hear the word democracy in a Washington think tank, your ears ought to go up.
Yeah.
Like the National Endowment for Democracy.
Right.
that this is about destroying democracy.
Yeah,
By
it
this
sounds
way,
it implies the opposite, but it's
yeah,
once history shows it's basically the opposite of what it appears.
yeah. So what is this defense foundation for? Let's call it FDD, Foundation for Defense of Democracy. It was started after 9/11 by a Republican National Committee Director of Communications, Cliff May, and the money bags that created that think tank are tied to Netanyahu and the AIPAC, including Sheldon Adelson, the Las Vegas Macau gambling casino mogul, who gave a $25 million contribution at the end of the campaign to Trump. They include Samuel and Edgar Bronfman of the Bronfman family, the former president of the World Jewish Congress, who did this blackmail against the Bank of Switzerland, the National Bank of Switzerland, for the Nazi gold and various other things, the whiskey baron. It includes Michael Steinhardt and Paul Singer, the billionaire Wall Street speculators. These are all pro-Netanyahu billionaires in America. And the key person, the vice president of this Foundation for the Defense of Democracy, Toby Dershowitz, spent 14 years, 14 years as the communication head of AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, which has been described as an agent of the Israeli government with a stranglehold on the U.S. Congress with its power and influence. And Trump was a featured speaker at the AIPAC conference in March. So that gives us a little bit of hint, but now let's go back to Mike Flynn.
Mm-hmm.
Flynn and Mike Pompeo both agree that the Iran nuclear deal of Obama should be scrapped, and they call Iran a state sponsor of terrorism. Now, these happen to be positions very dear to Netanyahu's heart. If you go back to Netanyahu's attempts to block the Obama-Iran agreement and the chill that took place in Netanyahu and Obama bilateral relations because of that agreement, we begin to see a geopolitical pivot taking place here. Well, Mike Flynn wrote a book together with someone named Michael Ledeen, Ledeen. I know as an author of books, you don't co-author a book with just anyone. You don't just put your, and if you're a 3-star general, you definitely don't put your name beside someone if you don't firmly believe your thoughts and their thoughts are in harmony.
Mm-hmm.
Well, who is Michael Ledeen? Many people don't know this name. Michael Ledeen is a freedom scholar at something called the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. James Woolsey, the CIA former director who is being considered for a top Trump cabinet position, is a member of the board of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Jim Rickards, the financial guru, is on the board of advisors for the Foundation Defense of Democracies Committee.
That's very interesting. Let me just stop you there because we have Jim on this show from time to time. So thanks for bringing this to our attention.
I read his stuff, and he's very well informed. He talks big about gold. I'm myself very positive about gold, so I read what Rickard says, but it might be that he's not being quite honest with us. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But we're looking at a specific network here.
Sure.
And then if Michael Ledeen is the godfather of the neoconservatives. He, back in 2003, when the Bush-Cheney war with Wolfowitz in Iraq, Ledeen gave a speech called Time to Focus on Iran, the Mother of Modern Terrorism. And he gave it for the Netanyahu-friendly Jewish Institute for National Security Affairs in Washington. He said the time for diplomacy is over. It's time for a free Iran, free Syria, and free Lebanon. Mm-hmm. And he said Iran, Iraq, Syria should get their freedom through a U.S.-led total war.
Some freedom.
Some freedom. And that's very much what Hillary Clinton's Arab Spring, with the war going on in Syria and so forth, and of course the war in Iraq.
Hillary was always, she said she was all in favor of democracy for the Arab Spring countries, but our kind of democracy, which really meant that we want the United States to be lording it over you, I guess.
Yeah, it's called fascism, totalitarianism. But so this is, and you look at the subsequent cabinet appointments. For example, look at the education secretary, Betsy DeVos. Most people never heard of Betsy DeVos. She's a Republican contributor and blah blah blah. Well, you don't have to look very far to find out Betsy DeVos. I happen to know the DeVos name because I've been looking at American geopolitics for some 25, 30 years now. And the DeVos family during the Reagan era was very, very financially active. They were the founders of Amway. Betsy DeVos is married to the Amway fortune and is a billionaire. But her maiden name is Betsy Prince DeVos. Her baby brother, is a man named Eric Prince, the founder of Blackwater Security. So, and she's for these charter schools. She wants to destroy the public school system and have charter schools with vouchers and so forth, so that the families of well-to-do families can define their own agenda, and you don't have this traditional American system where everybody has the right to a basic education, and if you have the merit in election and so forth, you can find your way up to college. University education is now becoming an elite privilege because you have to spend a fortune, maybe $25,000, $30,000, $50,000 to get a college degree or an advanced degree or pay the tuition.
Let me ask you this, for the sake of time. I'd like to get to a couple of these major points here. So the Obama Clinton foreign policy was a failure. You just gave some. You just talked about that a bit, and it didn't work out very well. I mean, I'm looking here, William, today. I just if I go to Zero Hedge, I see some headlines like, Egypt shuns Washington, supports Russia, back coalition in Syria. It seems as though Syria has won some. The government there has won some battles, and it seems as though the U.S. is really being pushed out of the Middle East. So no wonder these people are worried. And then, as you mentioned, the one belt, one highway, one road system, all of the banking infrastructure, all of the trade infrastructure that's being put in place by the BRICS, at least by Russia and China, and I guess India's in there as well as Iran. I mean, this is phenomenal. That is what's going on, and we never hear about it here. It's never talked about in America. It's not in the interest of the propagandist, I guess. But let me ask you this: what do you think Trump would do differently? What do you think the deep state that's behind him? What do you think they're going to demand of him, and what are they getting set up to do?
I think what they're getting set up to do is try to seduce Putin and Russia. I don't think Putin is that stupid. He's a very shrewd, experienced politician. But I think they're going to try, and they are trying with every means. And the Russian media is just euphoric about Putin. I was a bit shocked. But that doesn't say Putin is euphoric about Trump, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't say Putin is. I think they're going to try to split Russia with some concessions, maybe ease the sanctions, say, let's cooperate more and cool down on your support for the BRICS and China and all this stuff, and then demonize China, demonize Iran. So you break two legs of this China, Iran, Russia triangle that creates a land space. It's land power versus naval power. Mm-hmm. U.S. is a naval power. Britain is a naval power. And that is the key to their global hegemony since more than 100 years. So you break up that alliance that's forming over land because you can't defeat it. When you link the land space of Eurasia, it's impenetrable in military terms. So They're going to try to break that up. They have to rebuild America's defenses, as the PNAC said in 2000 in their paper, Dick Cheney and Jeb Bush and all these people, Paul Wolfowitz. They've got to rebuild America's defenses. It's a mess. It's a complete corrupt mess. The American military-industrial complex, the Pentagon, the whole shebang. So I think what Russia demonstrated with their shoestring budget of deployment in Syria at the end of 2015, they demonstrated devastating military technologies that the U.S. was completely blind to. They were so arrogant with their cocky, we defeated Russia 25 years ago and they're gone. They're a waste. And Russia comes back and does military technologies that just leave the jaw dropped of people in the Pentagon who know what that means. So they're not ready to fight a war with a combination of Russia and China. So they've got to somehow get in shape for that. They've got to get the military economy up to that. One of Trump's pledges is to bring the size of the U.S. Navy up to that of the Navy second to none, which it's not right now. It's a rust bucket Navy in real terms in many senses. And so a huge Navy construction program that hasn't been seen since Ronald Reagan back in the 1980s. These are the little hints at what Trump is going to do. I think the other thing is they are going to engineer a dollar rise, a strong dollar over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years to suck capital in from all the rest of the world, from the Eurozone and Europe, from the emerging markets and so forth, that is going to finance a rebuilding of the infrastructure to prepare the American military base for this coming war that Donald Trump is there to do. I think that is the ugly agenda of the Trump presidency from the patriarchs who put him there in the first place. He's there, baby. He's a Hollywood actor. It's showtime. Look at his face. Look at his eyes when he gives a speech. Yeah. There's nothing honest in there. It's hollow.
So, William, let me ask you: do you think that what he's looking to do then? Just overwhelm Russia with war, or with the war machinery, with missiles?
No. He's looking to neutralize Russia, to delude Russia.
I see, and cut him off from the Asian.
Yeah, cut him off from the China thing.
Right.
There's going to be propaganda in Russia suggesting that China is going to imperialistically steal the Eastern Siberia mineral wealth and so forth, because Russia doesn't have the resources to develop that part of Russia, Vladivostok and that whole Eastern Siberia. And
so where will that propaganda come from? Is that part of what the United States does in Russia with their own propaganda machinery?
Yeah, it'll come from all sorts of channels.
Yeah.
The Russian press is not as controlled as the American press.
I believe that. Yeah.
It's the American press is like NATO gives a statement, and every newspaper from the Washington Post to the New York Times echoes that.
Well, Washington Post just called RT fake news, right?
This fake news. I get so bored with it.
It's so evil. I mean, it's just so wrong. Everything in the United States is not fake, and everything that disagrees with the mainstream is fake. I have to ask you. This is a question you mentioned. Jim Rickards a while ago. Jim was on this show not too long ago, and he said he's not worried so much about nuclear war as he is about cyber warfare. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, what did he mean by cyber warfare?
Well, I think he's probably looking at Russia or countries that.
What did he say?
Well, he says he doesn't think that nuclear war is really the threat of the future. It's more cyber warfare, because you can go in and you can neutralize a country through cyber warfare. You don't have to destroy their buildings and everything else. You can. He says, and this. I'm just remembering what he said. He says the Russians can come in and shut down our stock exchange tomorrow if they want to. They have the ability to do that. He said, And
Well, the U.S. has the ability to shut down.
Absolutely. So that what he's telling me is the U.S. can do the same thing as well if we want. And so what he's suggesting is nuclear war isn't his fear. At least this is what he tells me. What he really believes, I don't know, but that's what he tells me. What are your thoughts?
About cyber war?
Yeah, cyber war or nuclear war, which is more likely?
I don't think nuclear war is going to happen.
Good.
Cyber war is ongoing. It's ongoing everywhere. Look at the NSA. If you want to talk about cyber war. Look at the Pentagon cyber war. Look at what they're doing. I've met Americans in Germany who are engaged as civilians in the cyber war unit of the Pentagon. So let's not be naive here. This is not a Russian specialty. The Chinese, the Russians, the Israelis, and the U.S. are the four nations in the world who have developed these capabilities. In some cases, there are stories that Russia has developed advanced communication capabilities that completely knock out the communications of the U.S. Navy when they incurred into the Black Sea to threaten against Russia in Crimea. They just knocked out everything, and there was the U.S. Navy sitting naked without the ability to even call back home to mama.
Wow. That's very interesting. Well, that sort of thing, I mean, you study this on an ongoing basis. You write about, you write prolifically, and I just like to tell our listeners that they should really visit your site and buy your books. And I just think you're a godsend. You provide information that Americans don't generally get. Of course, that might cause you to be labeled a fake news source, but fake is.
That if it comes. But can I say something, Jay?
Sure.
To this on my website, I now, with a great support from my readers, have decided to launch something new on my website. If you go on my website, if any of your listeners go on williamengdahl.com, you'll have a pop-up offer for a free newsletter twice a month, a geopolitical newsletter from sections of some of my books and so forth, and other my comments on geopolitics. And now I'm going to launch a audio seminar series monthly for a subscription seminar at a modest price that most everybody can afford.
Sure.
I need to support my continued research because it's very important that I'm completely independent from publishers, from anyone who might decide at this time or that to say, okay, you're too uncomfortable for me. I cut you off.
Yep. No, I thank God for you. You are independent, and you have fought to remain independent, and that's not easy, William. I know, because that's how they control things. It's all through the monetary system and the money. And okay, you want that stipend, you want research, you want to go forward in that direction. No, you're going to have to move over in this direction because we are too uncomfortable with what you're saying. So I'm very thankful for your work and others like you, but. I hope that our people will go. William Engdahl, that's Engdahl, WilliamEngdahl.com. William, just one more thing I'd like to ask you before we discontinue our discussion for today. You're very knowledgeable about the oil markets, about how oil fits into geopolitics, and I couldn't help but think that part of this whole issue has to be the control of the oil markets too, because Russia is out there producing oil that that Asia needs and wants, and I think Iran is continuing to push oil into the markets, and Saudi Arabia doesn't like that very much. America's ally there. It's an evil ally, I might say, but they don't like that very much. And so I think a lot of this has to do with control of the oil markets and the resource markets in general around the world.
Very, very much, but I have a gut feeling that in the next months, let's say the next 6 months, maybe even shorter, there's going to be some dramatic shocks in the world oil market, and how that'll play out. I'm looking into that right now because the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s was all about keeping oil off the market from the Anglo-Americans to keep that war going so that the price of oil could be high. And I think after 3 years of this oil price collapse, now the Anglo-American oil giants and the banks behind them need to have a higher oil price. So let's see. But that's the project that I'm going into right now.
Well, that's interesting, William, though, too, because if you're talking about a stronger dollar during that time frame, that would seem to run against that. So you would think a stronger dollar would not be in keeping with a much higher oil price. But I guess
oil is priced in dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it would feed that very nicely.
Yeah. Well, I suppose if we control the oil. In the meantime, of course, we have our fracking and we have all that that's coming on here as well. But so anyway, it's really interesting. I thank you very much, William, for being with us again and giving us your insights. It certainly does make sense from a geopolitical point of view, in my way of thinking, what you're suggesting, the divide and conquer, because it's all about economics, isn't it? And you have India's in that mix too, aren't they? India's in that mix with the
India. I don't know what's going on in India. Modi seems to have lost his mind.
Yeah.
What he did with the currency.
Yeah.
This is insane.
Yeah, it's really.
This is part of the Bank for International Settlements agenda to eliminate cash in the economy, have a cashless economy, which is pure fascist control. Pure fascist control.
Yeah. So I mean, I've always wondered, where India sits in this balance of geopolitical balance, because they seem to be playing it both ways, kind of.
Yeah, well, that's the problem with India, I think. A little bit like with Erdogan in Turkey, he doesn't quite have a strategy. China has a clear strategy. It may be wrong, but they have a clear strategy. Russia under Putin has an increasingly clear strategy, and Iran, I think, has more or less a clear strategy. But India is just a confusion.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Well, we'll be watching what you write about all of these topics, William, and I want to thank you very much for being with us, and we'll look to do it again sometime real soon.
Very much enjoyed. Thank you very much, Ken.